So let's just walk through for just a minute, just to kind of refresh everybody on what we're talking about. We were looking specifically just at one area, which was the hopeful 90% engagement score in the Global Opinion Survey. And the actual results were 76%. And to the plant manager and others, this was quite disturbing because they felt they had as much talent as any plant. And they felt that the engagement, what they had been emphasizing, should be paying off, and it obviously was not. So they're quite concerned about that. And then we started remember our Jefferson Memorial metaphor, we started asking the why questions to trace back what was going on. And in the culture, we said that the managers and technicians are disconnected. Their worlds are different, their communication is different, they have very different understandings of what's going on. The primary focus was to get the job done as usual. That's how people behaved. That's the way they did their job. People only helped within their own department. Processing and packaging processes were very inconsistent. That's what the fly could see happening. And the vision was not getting from the top to the bottom. And whatever the new plans or initiatives were, whether it came from headquarters or from plant management, it didn't disturb or change any behaviors. People just kept doing the same thing. Okay? So those were our notes from last week from the group that was the fishbowl team. And then we had our 4 systems over here. And would somebody from each of those groups, would somebody just kind of, without reading all of those, just give us the essence of what you found in the system that you were looking at? So let's start with leadership and capabilities. What were the key points there, just to refresh our memory? As you're approaching clients and they say, oh, we can't do it in one day, we've got to break it up, we can do it here, we can do it 2 weeks later, you'll have the same fog with the client from the data that they produced 2 weeks earlier. They won't have a clue, they'll have to really get back into it, and it's going to take some time to get back. So this actually is demonstrating that dynamic very nicely. So go ahead, CJ, take your best shot.
One of the key takeaways was that leadership didn't, I think we decided they didn't see a necessity to provide the vision throughout the organization. They didn't communicate it well, they didn't see a need for lower levels to have that vision and understanding.
Okay. They may have felt they already did that, they had a meeting, they sent out the email, these are adults, they should know what's going on, and we shouldn't have to coddle them and all that kind of stuff. Reese?
Well, it ended up being more that they didn't want to share the economic outlook because they didn't want to freak people out.
Okay.
They felt like, oh, our culture's good, let's not mess with it, but
Right.
really, that was poisoning the well.
Right. And we'll get to the assumptions behind this in just a minute, but yeah, those are some of the key things. So when you see those things happening in leadership and capabilities, then you understand the behavior that managers and techs are disconnected in what they're doing every day. That dynamic in that system helps us explain why the behaviors are showing up the way they are. So we're building our little networks of what's going on, okay? How about, let's go to systems. Here we had systems, we're looking primarily at reward systems, information systems, and decision-making systems. So somebody from that group, would you just kind of give us a summary of what you came up with?
So the
Please.
main thing is that output is rewarded, both in appreciation and financially, and that led to other things like communication not happening between departments because they only care about their own. No one wanted to take any risks in being creative. They just wanted to do what they've been told to do and do it as efficiently as possible.
Okay? So the support systems were all about keeping the lines running and doing your part of whatever that means to keep the lines running. That's it. Okay? All right? Very good. Now, you can see where that leads to the get the job done as usual, people helping only in their own department because that's where the incentives are. That also shows why we still, even though the processing and packaging technicians on a shift are part of one team, you saw in the case that when processing goes down, the packaging people are standing around and, I wish they'd hurry up so we can get back to work. But there's no interconnection between those two processes that are, in fact, joined at the hip. They are two steps that lead to the same thing. So, okay, so very good. The system's there. The other one was the management is the bottleneck for too much. We're waiting to talk with our manager. The manager has no time for us. And so we're kind of in limbo and we're waiting for direction. Don't have a chance to get that. Okay, good. How about structure? Somebody from structure, tell us what you saw there. Please, Marina.
So there were was such that all the decisions were communicated top down
Okay.
without workers or managers having an input. So headquarters would tell managers what to do, managers would tell workers what to do without any type of discussion going on. And then, so it wasn't very flexible in terms of what they were trying to achieve and what headquarters envisioned. And then the structure was also in 4 separate teams, so there was not enough coordination among them. And the scheduling and the streamlining of work processes was also structured on because some of the maintenance, all of the maintenance techs were scheduled for the day shift, even though the production line was running 24/7. And the processing department had a lot more going on than the other departments, so it was kind of a bottleneck.
Okay. Is that top-down structure and flow of things, how does that work when you're trying to get engagement? What's the problem with that flow if engagement is one of the things you say you value? Please, Chris.
Seems like maybe there wouldn't be a mechanism for actually giving feedback and contributing the other way if it's really top down.
Okay. So if I'm never asked for input, and if I give input, it's never listened to, what does that do to my sense of engagement in terms of really taking my job seriously and trying to help the bigger cause that is a lot broader than what I personally can affect? What does that do to people? You start to tune out. You start to tune out. You know, well, if nobody cares, then why should I care? And it won't do any good anyway, and so, okay, fine. There was an article in HBR, oh golly, it's probably 35 years ago, but it was really classic. It was written by a worker on one of the assembly lines in Detroit for one of the automakers. And the headline of the article was, "By day, I make the cars." And then it outlined all the things that this person was into in the community and family and other things where there was all this talent being used. But by day, he was on the assembly line, he had his wrench, he made the same motion, 800 times in an 8-hour shift, and by day he made the cars, but after the day was over, he lived his life. Very interesting article, engaging. Okay, those dynamics have not changed terribly in 35 years. All right, very good. The issues, I'm sorry, under processes, who was our process? Please.
So just building off of what you just said, not only do they not really listen to those ideas, but the ideas and the initiatives that they do put into place, they don't last very long. They last 12 months, and then something else becomes important, and then they lose track of it. So just more incentive to not really care about what's going on, because even the things they do decide to do are just going to fizzle out pretty quick anyway. And then also, there's the no formal transfer of knowledge and communication. So training and discussion, there's I guess it happens sometimes, but it's not really formalized, and so it doesn't really happen.
Okay. All right. So why is the statement that projects rarely last more than 12 months, why is that an indictment against the level of engagement in the plant? We have an initiative, it's rolled out, and after 12 months, it's gone. Why is that an indictment of the level of engagement in the plant?
Couple of reasons, I would think. One is that they know something else is going to be coming down the pipe, so don't get too committed to what you're working on now, because it's going to have to change anyways. Plus, if it changes in 12 months, whether or not it's working, or whether or not they've really gotten up and running, then it can breed a sense of futility, even if you really like it.
Okay. Okay. So there is a sense of futility. All right. Very much so. What else? Anything else? Please, Chris.
Maybe causal to a certain extent. They're not engaging. They're not taking on the new initiatives. They're not.
I mean, a lot of these initiatives, they only live every day of people who are doing the work, make them come alive. And you can roll it out, you can have great strategy, you can have great analysis, you can have great talent, all this. But if the people don't implement the program or the initiative day to day, And if management then is given a new set of marching orders, as we've described here, then management changes its attention, and so does the workforce. And so that helps it die. I have seen initiatives that lived after management turned its attention to other things because the technicians made it stay alive because they saw how valuable it was, and they took care of business. And they didn't care that the attention from on high had moved. They had seen the benefit to the business and what they were trying to do, and they kept it alive. I remember one of our clients, she was a new manager in a Hewlett-Packard plant. And she was just walking through the manufacturing floor one day, and she saw one of the people on the line take some copper wiring and throw it on the floor. And another guy from across the other line comes up and he walks up to this guy. He says, "Excuse me, are you new here?" And the guy says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, has nobody told you that we don't take the copper wire and throw it on the floor because we can recycle it, but only if it's clean. And so we take it when we're done and we put it in that bin over there." And the new worker starts giving this guy a look like, "Oh, give me a break." And the veteran says, "Hey, don't you understand about profit sharing around here? We all share in the profits of things like that. You don't put the wire on the floor." He got very forceful with the guy. So she sat there and watched for about another hour and a half, and the new worker never put a piece of copper on the floor. He took it to the bin. Now that's engagement. Okay, and that's what's missing. Anyway, okay, all right. Very good, very good. All right, so they don't last any longer. We said under strategy, they have continuous improvement is the mantra right now for the company. Lean manufacturing is a big tool, but the priorities do change very often. And then we got to these underlying values and beliefs. So this is, in the words of Edgar Schein, the hardest thing to identify in a culture is what those underlying values and beliefs. So let's just go down the ones that you identified. These are your words. Headquarters is clueless. Now, what was going on behind that statement?
Well, that stemmed from the quote that those guys have never made a flake in their lives.
Yeah.
And that's what they said. But just that they have no idea what's going on in the factory. These initiatives they're passing down, they have no idea whether or how they're going to make anything.
Okay. Brandon, does that quote sound familiar?
Oh yeah, that was almost.
I took from the team's report. They did a nice job in their report of giving a lot of quotes to substantiate what the key points were that they were making to management. I took most of those quotes, and those are sprinkled throughout the case. So that's real stuff. Okay. So all right. Lean is a joke. It will pass us by. That's kind of part and parcel to the first one. Do we see evidence of that as we went through the systems and into the behaviors? You see, the cause and effect is now becoming very, very clear. This is the way people are thinking. This is the way they're working in the systems. These are the behaviors that come out, and here are the results that are disappointing to us. Okay? This was an interesting one. Our people aren't very smart. What was going on there? Please.
This was particularly the technicians that would come in. They're only in the day, and so if something breaks in a different shift, the workers had never been trained how to fix things, so they'd kind of jerry-rig it together, and then the technicians would come in and just say, "Oh, look at how stupid they are. They don't even know how to fix this."
They're not as smart as I am.
Yeah.
I'm in the maintenance group.
And so it contributed to kind of hierarchy and distance issues, and oh, look at how they did it. They're not even, you couldn't even train them to fix it right.
Okay, all right, other comments, CJ?
I think it's also just kind of a general get the normal job done mentality. We don't expect you to think, we don't expect you to come up with ideas. It's, we know why you're here, we hired you at a low salary to get the job done, just go get it done.
So this is an interesting one because which comes first, the chicken or the egg here? We don't think you're good to handle it, and in fact, you do stupid things on the line, so, you know, there we go. But, you know, does it come from because we don't think you can do anything more than that, or does it come from actual lack of talent? The plant manager says this is as talented a group as any plant he's worked in.
Let's say, in addition to both of those things, it's also the information being passed down from management down to the line people, because, well, they're not smart enough to get lean, they're not smart enough to understand the financial difficulties that the plant is in. You know, none of that, so I'm not even gonna bother trying to get through their, you know, get through the heads.
And they're such weak, fragile beings that if we gave them the economic reality, they would just totally die. They would be totally paralyzed and unable to do anything to help us because they're so weak.
And I think the implication of like sharing that information is important to consider though, because you could really lose control and things get really bad, but not in the context that they can't handle it. It's more like how we message this in context of everything else we're doing. And that's just more, that's fear driven rather than strategically driven.
Yeah. And so a strategic information sharing and visioning, that is one of the key skills of leadership. If you don't think they can handle it, I would say probably the issue is you don't know how to handle it, which is a leadership deficiency. Okay? Very good. Yeah, they can't handle the truth. And the other underlying paradigm is our job is just to keep things running. Now, do you see how those thought patterns manifest themselves in the systems leading to the behaviors that are disappointing our engagement score? Okay. Now, somebody connect the engagement issue with the fact that the lean manufacturing improvements are not proceeding as well as at other plants, even those that have had serious problems. We're doing it by the book here, but we're not doing as well as the others. How does all of this impact? We didn't look at lean specifically, we looked at engagement, but how does what we have here, how does this connect with what's going on in the lean world at this plant?
Lean requires people on the line to find the excess and trim it. And so if you have a system that doesn't engage people in doing that and doesn't support them making changes themselves, then you're not going to be able to implement lean principles.
You can put people through the training, which they're doing on a limited basis. You can put people through the training. But if all this other stuff is working against a sense of engagement, that they need to take ownership, that they should be trying to help move things forward, if nothing is supporting that, the training was just an exercise that people say, well, that was dumb, and besides, we know it's not going to last anyway. So I see the two are directly connected. And if you're not a people person, if engagement is not your thing as a plant manager, the plant manager, Arthur Jones, is all about results, right? As I look at that, I say, well, your lean results will never come about as long as this stuff keeps going on. So whether you're a people person or not, this is a bad business situation that, again, leaders need to be able to address and figure out how do you change the system. Okay? Good? Anything else? Any other comments as we walk through that? Anything else from last week that stuck in your mind that we haven't mentioned here? Okay, one last thing. At one point in my P&G career, we were building a new Pampers plant in Germany. I was not announced yet, but I was the OD person who was going to help that plant start up, as well as help the existing German plant get better, because they were having some problems. And we had the two architects who were designing the new plant. We had them come to our plant, and they said, we want to talk to the experts that you have to help us understand how to better lay out the plant. I said, okay, I'll arrange for that. So who are the experts that I got together for the meeting with these two architects, these two engineers? They were the technicians that worked on the lines. And we sat down and I said to them, and the two visitors from Cincinnati are here in their suits, and our technicians are in their jumpsuits and other stuff. And I said, these gentlemen would like to know if we're going to build a new Pampers operation, what would we do differently? And these folks just started in. Well, for one thing, if we had an extra 3 feet between the lines, we have to get the big roll of fabric material that goes under the diaper, we carry that in a fork truck. If we had another 3 feet, we could just take that fork truck, go right in, unload it, back out, and be gone. Now, because it's 3 feet closer, it takes us about 4 moves going in and about 4 moves going out, and all of that. And these guys were absolutely dumbfounded. They had never thought about that. We came up with a different design for the packing area to make it not a one-person job that was remote from the rest of the operation, but to make it right as part of the team, so the team could help, and on and on and on. And these guys were absolutely blown away. They said, we had no idea this stuff was going on. Now, none of the technicians could design a new plant, but they had the bird's eye view of what was going on, and you couple that with those who were going to be making some strategic designs and decisions, that was a very good combination. The Karlsheim plant had the best startup of any Pampers operation in the company's history, because we listened to what was going on down below, and we incorporated that into our strategic plan. So that's the other thing that this Birmingham plant is missing, was the lack of engagement. All those insights, the copper wire on the floor, the 3 feet between the 2 lines, all those insights are absent as they're trying to get lean manufacturing to be successful. Culture in the country and in the plant that you are totally unfamiliar with, and to pull this out very nicely, and to have senior management in Europe impressed and take seriously what you have done, I think is just a stellar job. And again, I go back to notice where they focused on those underlying values and beliefs and quotes all the way through to let that be the selling point to management. And obviously, they got it. They got the message. So, very good.
That's really an interesting thing that you didn't pick up on structural things and some other. I mean, that came, but you framed this around underlying values and beliefs. Conscious choice, I guess, to say this. Why? I mean, why did you do that?
I think we felt that was more impactful. Like it told the story in such a way that they'd walk away with it instead of, oh, there's some system things. And
This isn't just an analytical problem. This is real, strongly held beliefs that are different and are obviously wrong.
And there were some visceral reactions as we shared the slide deck with them, especially when it came to some of the quotes about management, and management doesn't trust their workers. People were like, oh, just like, gut reaction, like, ouch. We're still saying stuff like that? And I think that they realize this is a bigger problem than they realize it's
Well done.
Yeah, very good. I'm thinking back to an interview they had with a South American. And we're going to talk about the client how do you approach a client. We're going to do that after we finish this section. So, questions, please. Is it Doug?
One syllable, Nate.
Nate. Okay, sorry. Where's Doug?
Right here.
I'm sorry. Okay.
We work together.
All right, that's why. Yeah. All right.
And you touched on this a little bit. Maybe you'll touch on it later. But yeah, just how you go about picking that group initially to find out what the culture is.
Okay. Short answer. Ideally, a diagonal slice of the target population. So if it's a small company, let's say they've got 100 employees, I'd like to have maybe 8 to 10 in the room, if we can get that many. If not, you can do it with 6 or so. I wouldn't go under 6. I'd have at least 6, but more like 8 or 10 is better. Okay. And senior level management, different levels of supervision, frontline workers, for the very reasons that we talked about here with this case. Because everybody's got a different viewpoint, but everybody has expertise and knowledge on some stuff that others don't have. And so if we're trying to understand the system, I'd like to have the system represented. Now, very often, the client will want the leadership team to do it, period. Okay, that's fine. How many are on the leadership team? Well, we have 6. Okay, fine. could we add 4 or 5 other people from other areas of the organization so that you got a little bit more representation of the whole.
Do you find that when you have senior level people there with lower level people, that the lower level people are a little bit afraid to say things?
Depends on the culture. I've not had that in very many, I can only think of one occasion where that, no, 2, where that was a problem. So in your pre-interviews, for example, if you have a chance to interview some of the individuals ahead of time, you might get a sense for that and can help that. Okay? Frankly, if it's real strong, then I wouldn't have the other people come in. I'd do it with just the leadership team, and you take your chances on what you've got there.
Okay.
That's where, but I might say, let's do some interviews, and those people might not be in the room, but if you've got some of their themes, when we come to the Post-it notes, you could put some Post-its up and say, by the way, here's some themes that we heard from some of the interviews. We'll just put those in with your notes, and then let's go from there.
Okay.
We had one client, they wanted to do a diagnosis because their diversity program wasn't delivering. They were hiring very bright, very well-educated women, minorities, and after about 18 months to 3 years, 90% of them were leaving. And so the vice president was a good guy, and he'd been through this with some other issues. He said, can we use this for diversity? I said, sure. He says, okay, well, good. Well, let me see when I get the leadership team together, and let's see when you can come down, and let's do this. I said, okay, well, but let me ask you, Jim, let me just ask you a question. What's the demographic makeup of your leadership team? Well, we had 10 white males. I said, okay. Given that our topic is diversity, we probably need a few other people in there, don't you think? Oh, yeah, good. And my rule of thumb, Jim, is that in a session like this, if you bring minorities in, they are not the minority numerically in this session. So for everyone that you have on the leadership team, we should have 2 other people coming in. So we changed the dynamics of the majority. Okay. Now, that group had a phenomenal session because everybody was willing to open up because the intent was help us understand where we're going. And they had a good experience. But we, that was one where, that one I was pretty heavy-handed. You can't have just the leadership team sit there and pontificate about why diversity's not going anywhere.
Right.
You've got to get the experts in the room.
Dave, do you ever ask a human resource person, somebody else who's familiar with the players in the organization, give you a sense of who's willing to talk and be open, and who isn't ready to pick a fight? I mean, there's some issues
Very
here about
often
who you have, who you pick besides just position.
Right. Very often it's the HR person who will select. And so I'll say, let's get a demographic slice, but we need people who are, first of all, they are thought leaders among their peers. Okay, so in other words, when I understand that Brandon is going, representing this class, everybody says, okay, Brandon's in tune with what's going on here. He knows how we feel about this stuff. He's a good representative, and we know he's not a wimp. He'll speak up. So great, I feel good that he's going there. And we've got others that are going. So first of all, they have the respect of their peers. Secondly, they have a reputation for trying to make this place better. No one doubts their motives. They're not in there to grind an axe. They're there to help the company get better results. Those are the kind of people. And then, of course, the demographics. I may have mentioned this in one of the previous classes, the P&G plant. The HR manager didn't want to invite the union president. And I said, well, now, can the union president cause problems for whatever you might do in this diagnosis and design session? Well, yeah, but we don't want them there because they're always contrary and they're just tough to deal with. Do you think you're going to be doing yourself a favor if they're not there? I said, they've got to be there. Not just the president. Doesn't he have 2 or 3 other people in the leadership? Yeah, I said, they got to be there. You're going to have union members from the technician group there. Their leadership's got to be there, just like the plant leadership's got to be there. Well, and at the end of the diagnosis day, which had some pretty hairy issues for the union members, the union presidency and the plant management team were just like this on what the issues were and what needed to be done. And they were a united team now to go in and shake up that culture. It never would have happened. And the HR manager said to me, I I'm so glad I listened to you on this. I never would have done it, but I've been through this rodeo a few times. You cannot dodge that element and have a success. Okay? Marina?
So I have 2 questions. The first one, just to clarify, so is it 6 to 8 people per role? So like 6 to 8
No,
managers?
total.
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 So that would be enough
Right.
to represent.
If you're going to get a group in the room for a day, nominally a day, I don't think you want a group of much more than, I wouldn't have more than about 10 people in that. So, yeah, you might have one engineer, one quality person, a couple of people from the floor, 3/5 of the leadership team, whatever. You'd have a representative sample, but not a lot of people.
And my other question is, have you ever faced a situation where you couldn't tell this group exactly what you were trying to accomplish with this conversation?
Where I couldn't tell them?
Yeah.
No. I mean, it's one of the things I will recommend to you is that you at least have a conversation with everyone that's going to be there so that they understand what's going to happen and why they were chosen and what we need for them to provide for the good of the exercise.
It's just sometimes when you tell people exactly what you're trying to accomplish, then you kind of sway them to go that direction and suggest some things that would be favorable towards your end goal, but I don't know.
Well, the end goal is to get their honest viewpoint of what's going on. That's the goal. And we get a group of 10 people, each giving their honest viewpoint on what they see going on. That helps us see what's going on. And when we see what's going on and the causes and effects, that allows us to come to a few priorities that everybody understands, identifies with, and has energy to do something about, to actually make an improvement.
Yeah, just as an example, I guess, to clarify, so, like, I needed to go to a group of engineers and ask of their opinion about the rotation program, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for engineers, when you just mention rotation program, they run. So I couldn't really tell them what I was trying to accomplish. I had to get the information out of them without saying that this is actually gonna be implemented in their department or something.
So you had to couch it in different terms. Like,
Right.
I need to get your feedback or your point of view on skill development or whatever it might be.
But you find it beneficial to always put your agenda up front and let them know what it is that you're trying to.
Unless you know ahead of time that there's some controversy and that you might not get quality input. So I just haven't had that come up very often.
Sounds like you framed that around a program rather than around a problem. But the issue that I see Dave doing is framing it around a performance problem. What is it that we, as a group, can see is not happening? It's a gap between what we think should happen, the various stakeholders think should happen, and what's actually happening.
So you don't actually make up your mind, this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we're gonna do depending upon where the discussion is.
And if you go in with, here's the program we think we want you to comment about.
Right.
You're no wonder you're worried about looking like you're favoring a solution. You've got one you're talking about.
So if the rotation program is the lightning rod, the bigger issue is skill development, collaboration between parts of engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So, give us your perspective on what helps or hinders collaboration. I've got some questions for you that I'll suggest as a template for that to help. Okay? Other questions? Yes.
If you don't mind, where are some areas where you tend to see this process get derailed? I mean, what are some of the problems that you've run up against where, I mean, I'm thinking about like management that brings you in and says that they want to make a change but are really just giving lip service to it and are not really committed to doing the hard work to make a change, things
Right.
like that. Where have you found this
We're
really
gonna,
get off track?
when we get into the how to approach a client, and we do the role play, we'll have some living color examples of those kinds of things. Those are issues. The worst one that I've ever had was, this was a subsidiary of one of our clients Our client told the subsidiary, you will be interviewed by these people, and you will give the data, and we'll go from there. Okay? So 2 of us went down, and we are interviewing with the president of the subsidiary and the leadership team. It's the only time I've ever done this where I had the very clear impression that we were not being told the truth. For example, one person in an interview goes to great lengths to tell me about the problems and issues with X. And then a couple of questions later in the interview, when we're talking about barriers, he mentions nothing about X. And I said, well, now, one thing I don't quite understand. You said here we had a problem with X, and as you're describing barriers, I haven't heard anything about X. Oh, well, it's really not that bad. Well, he didn't want to go on record. He didn't know what was going to be done with this data. He didn't want to go on record with details about X. But as we later found out, everybody had kind of made a pact among themselves of whoever these outsiders are that the parent company is foisting on us, don't show your cards. It's the only time that's ever happened to me. But it was very clear. The other interviewer had the same experience in different areas, and obviously nothing happened. The other one is occasionally there are people that are afraid to speak up. Very capable, but you get them in a group and they're a little afraid to speak up. That's why the Post-its help, because if people aren't ready to come out of the firing blocks speaking candidly, the Post-its help us perhaps to get there. We did have one client where nobody wanted to hurt the CEO's feelings. He was a really good guy, and he took great pride, and they were doing some wonderful things. But he had a vision that we could that the company's revenues would grow exponentially because of the trust that their customers had in individual product lines. If we could bring those product lines together and expose our customers to the full palette of our products, they would probably buy more than one that they're buying now. That was the whole idea. So we were going to do the diagnosis. We had the top 30 managers in the company from all the functions. And we did a diagnosis of best and worst, 15 in each group. But one of the deliberations was, Dick will get very uncomfortable when we're in the diagnosis discussions of the things, especially the 3 worst results. So we talked with HR and we invited Dick not to be part of the diagnosis or design work. And Dick was a good guy. He understood that about himself. And so we then helped him on the opening day kick it off and say, now, you all know me. I get a little nervous when we're looking at some things that aren't quite going perfectly. And he said, and in order to do this right, we need to be very clear and open with each other on what's not going perfectly. So, not that I'm not interested, but I don't want to inhibit the openness here. I'm going to step out, and I'll come back at the end. But I'm with you. And that worked very, very well. He was a quality guy. I knew that he would not abuse that and come in and say, well, no, that wasn't him. So we completely reshaped this financial services company, and they'd been growing at about 3-4% a year. In the 8 years after the redesign of what we did, they were in double-digit growth every single year. So his intuition had been right. We had put the organization together that made it happen, but we shielded him from the uncomfortable phase that he might have had trouble dealing with. Okay, other questions? Stick with me for 5 more minutes, then we'll take our break. Interviews. These are some interview questions. It's a very simple format. You don't need to understand manuals and manuals about their work and their technology. They don't need to understand textbooks about organizational behavior. All they need to do is talk about. This is on the slide deck that you already have, by the way. You should have it there. But for internal associates, and these were about 45-minute interviews. First question, and let me just kind of go through each one. What are your objectives? We're doing this right now at RBL. What are your objectives? And it's always interesting to see how people answer. There's no adjective, There's no clue as to what kind of objectives. I'm not asking about the corporate mission statement. I'm not asking about their departmental goals. I'm not asking about their personal performance metrics or anything like that. I just ask the question, and then they fill in whatever is there. You're going to get a case study at the end of the class that we'll be using next week, where you'll be doing another round of diagnosis. And in 350 interviews of research and product development people at Procter & Gamble, all the way from director level to the project bench, 350 people, not one single person listed as an objective to better meet consumer needs. This was an absolute catatonic reaction to the hierarchy of R&D, that not one person, including their directors, had mentioned anything about better meeting consumer needs. What you get with that first question is stream of consciousness. But what I'm getting from RBL, very typical of our culture, just within here, very segmented, very, okay, project manager talking about the projects, period. Marketing, anyway, so. It's a very revealing question. You never know what you're going to get from it, but when you see the themes, it will be a very interesting insight. 2, what factors help you achieve your success? Very open. What is it that's going on? Is it the people, the interaction, you've got the right equipment, you've got the information, you've got a good budget, you know, what is it? And Steve, back to your point, Marina, there's no leading here. This is, they're telling you with whatever agenda they have on their mind. What barriers prevent you from achieving more? Well, out of that question alone, out of these 350 interviews, we had a number of points come through, and they are captured in the case study that you're going to diagnose next week. If you could wave a magic wand, what 2 to 3 things would you change tomorrow? That lets you know in the mind of this person, what are the priorities for change? What are the more urgent things? What are the bigger things that they'd like to see changed? Okay? So, completely open-ended, about 45 minutes, and you get some good data. Now, you can plug everything you get there into the model, if you want to. You can do that. Okay? Any questions on those 4? Sorry. Doug.
Yeah, Doug. I had a question. When you do, 50 or more interviews, how do you code for that? How do you just look for recurring themes or just different things in the system?
Depends on how meticulous you want to be. I tend to be fairly meticulous.
Gotcha.
So I write down every response, or I type it into the computer. If another one comes up that's basically the same but different words, I just put a hash mark.
Okay.
This comment had 2. And then I order them in order of frequency, the most frequent ones down through.
Gotcha.
Now, I might not present that whole list to the group. If it's a very long list, I might just say, these were the top 10, and then, frankly, the other 200 responses were very, very fragmented among another 15 or so categories, but these are the top 10.
Gotcha.
Okay, something like that. Okay, and so I did that for every one of these questions.
Okay.
We did that. Okay? Now, what if the people you're interviewing are external customers or suppliers? Slightly different set of questions. First of all, what do you hope to gain by doing business with us? What box do those answers fall in the model? Stakeholder needs. What do you hope to gain by doing business? Why do you come to us, or what do you hope to gain? Secondly, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well are we doing on each of those items? What box do we have now? Results. First 2 questions, if you have nothing from the client, those first 2 questions, tabulate the answers. You've got stakeholder needs and current results from the mouth of the stakeholders. Number 3, as you look at our company, what do we do particularly well? You interact with other companies, not just us. As you look at us, what do we do particularly well? Okay? What things do we need to change or improve? And then the magic wand question again. You could wave your magic wand. What 2 or 3 things would you change? Gather enough input around those 5 questions, you've got very good stakeholder data. Okay? Justin? Sean, sorry.
Yeah, on question number 5, so it's referring to what is that referring to? Us? Like,
Probably question 4,
what things do we need to do? Okay.
okay? So in other words, these are the things that we need to change or improve. Which 2 or 3 would you like to see us improve overnight?
Okay.
So urgency, priority, gives you their sense of what those are. Okay? All right. Now, just a couple of war stories, then we'll break. I'm doing a study in Europe for Procter & Gamble. We're trying to find out from 9 different countries what's going on and how we might work better together across Europe. My title at the time was Training and Development Manager for Europe. I'm interviewing the management committee members of all 9 countries, and I'm interviewing the general manager for the UK. He comes in with his training manager in tow and a big manual of their training programs, because I'm the Training and Development Manager for Europe. And he sits down and he says, now, he said, we're glad to have you here today. We're happy to cooperate, but I need to let you know I've got another meeting that I've got to go to in about 15 minutes. But Terry here has got all of our training manuals and stuff, and he can answer any questions you might have. And I said, well, Alan, that's fine, but I'm not here to talk about training. Oh, you're not? Well, what? I said, I'm here to talk about your business, and I just have a few questions that I'd like to ask you about the business. Oh, okay, well, what? Well, what are your objectives? What are you trying to do with the business here in the UK? Well, he starts talking about the business. What things are helping you achieve your success, et cetera, et cetera. That interview went an hour and a half. I don't know what happened to his meeting that was 15 minutes away. But we were talking his agenda. This is an important point when we talk about approaching a client. This was his stuff, not my stuff. My interest was to understand what his stuff was. He had all kinds of time to talk about that. And we eventually did some things that made his life and his business grow. Anyway, okay, that was one. Another one, on the external side. Small Utah County, good friend of mine, Mike Bear, his nephew was in the program a few years ago, about 5 years ago probably. Mike has a foundry where they do sculptures and bronze castings and all kinds of good stuff. And they were struggling a bit. So we did some stakeholder feedback with some of his customers. Very, very simple. The artists, when they get their piece and they're ready, now they want to have it manufactured, they go to a foundry. What he found from talking to his customers was that they were looking for an 8-week turnaround. We bring the piece in and we're picking up statues and we can start to sell 8 weeks from now. His average turnaround time was 10 to 12 weeks. He said, I never knew they were looking for 8 weeks until we asked the question number 1. And now we see where we're losing it. They love our quality, they love our customer service, but we're too slow for them. Okay? So then with another BYU intern, we did a diagnosis. And we found 2 bottleneck areas in their line, in their flow, that was causing the 10 to 12 weeks rather than 8. And they then involved everybody in the workforce to develop standards of performance for each level that would get the whole down to about an 8-week turnaround. The 2 problem areas were women that were not keeping up. It wasn't because they were women, they just were not keeping up. And he said, gee, I don't know what to do because, well, you know, we got a family to support. And I said, Mike, I can't believe how uncommitted you are to the success of your business. He said, what do you mean? He told me just recently that this was one of the most impactful things that anybody had ever said to him. He said, it just stunned him. He said, your business is losing business because of the turnaround. And in order to consider 2 employees, you're willing to put the whole business at risk, which eventually might put them and you out of a job anyway. So they went through the process, they developed the standards. While he was wrestling with what to do about the situation with these 2 workers, within 2 weeks, they both came to him and voluntarily terminated because they couldn't keep up with the standard, but they recognized the standard was objective and how it fitted into the survival of the company. And they said, we're not a good fit, we have found something else, and we will leave. They did that on their own. So Those questions can be extremely powerful, and yet they're not directive and they're very open. And it's frankly, they're easy questions for you to walk in and work with people. Why don't we take a break? It's 15 minutes about. In the diagnosis process, the key question was why, right? Remember? The why questions move us upstream. Well, the so what questions move us downstream. And so I use so what just as a shorthand, but let me explain what I'm talking about here. So let's say that in the interview, we find out that people wait to be told what to do. That's one of the issues that people mention to us. Okay? So one question you can ask is, well, why do people wait to be told what to do? And those questions will usually bring you back to the systems or something upstream. The other question you could ask about that is, so people wait to be told what to do, so what? And so what's the impact of that? How does that impact what's going on? The fact that people wait to be told what to do. Well, our initiatives take longer. It takes forever to get something going because management has to come and explain everything to every group that's involved with it. And everybody's afraid to do anything. And so it slows us down. And oh, by the way, yeah, our cycle time to market is slower than competition. They're beating us with their new innovations. And we're always there with something very close about 2 months later. Not very good in a competitive market. So we've just taken one answer to a question, and with the why question you go upstream, and with the so what question you follow it downstream. Yeah, we have at Rexham we have a lack of clear vision. So what? How does that impact what people do every day? Well, these new initiatives come and people don't know what is really wanted, so they wait. Okay, so there's a behavior, but there are other elements around the systems, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a way to think about it. So when we were doing interviews with some of this was my interview sheet. I had my 4 questions, and then I had a column for the whys and the so whats. And so, for example, what factors help you achieve? Well, we have strong teamwork. Well, why is that? And notice they're going to take me back to a system. Well, we hire really good team players, people that have a history of working well in groups. Okay, so that's part of our hiring process system. Okay, fine. And so, and how does that strong teamwork help you, in terms of results or the outcomes? What's the outcome of that? Well, we have very little downtime because when that production line goes down, everybody goes in and we get it done and we're back up. Okay? So barriers, decisions take too long. Well, why is that? Well, we have all these silos and we got all these layers of hierarchy, and so you have to run it up, and then it's got to go to somebody else, it's got to go down, it's got to go back. That's why. Okay, so there's a system for us. And so what's the impact of these decisions taking too long? Well, competition is beating us to the marketplace. Okay. So simple format. Now, this might be just for you to help you connect the dots and start to see the systemic connections. That then helps you counsel. For example, if I know that Brandon's team had some of this, we had discussed some of the connections, but if they were going to communicate more of the same rather than a difference in changing the relationship between managers and technicians, because of the systemic understanding that you had, you would be able to tell the client, that's not quite going to do it from what we heard. Okay. So it may be just to help you with that. So that's why those slides are in there.